All right, today's the day I try installing Starlight on my girlfriend's 2014 Jeep Cherokee. So to give the rundown, basically we're gonna take her pillars out, her headliner out, all of the door handles and all of the pieces that are in your roof. We're gonna paint all of those pieces so that they all match up because she wants the black interior look with red accents. And we're gonna obviously install Starlight on it. It's gonna be a 450 piece kit, starting a little on the smaller side just to see how long it really takes, because I don't want to start doing 1,000 because it's 1,000 holes is so much more work. So I'm gonna get right into it. So to loosen the headliner, we first had to start removing the upper trim pieces like the handles, the lights, the mirrors in the front. And as you can see, it's a pretty tedious process, to be honest. I mean, it's a lot of just shoving the trim tool in and trying to ease out the clips so that you don't break any clips and that it goes back in properly later when you go to reinstall. You can see here as I'm trying to get the trim tool underneath the headliner and back to loosen those clips, since we've removed a lot of the pieces that are holding it in already. We found these rear trim pieces particularly challenging since Jeep decides to put so many clips in the back of them that hold them in. Not to mention, there's also airbags right behind the panel, so you have to be careful and not damage the airbag, even though we have the battery unplugged, so there's no reason that it should go off. But one problem we did have with the airbags is that we had unplugged the battery and many of the airbag sensors up until the point we realized we were going to have to pop the rear trunk to actually remove the headliner, and we can't do that without plugging the battery back in. So to avoid accidentally popping any airbags while plugging the battery back in, I made sure all of the wires for the airbags were unplugged, popped the trunk, and then disconnected the battery once again. So now with the headliner loose, the trunk open, the battery disconnected, and all of the wires disconnected as well, we decided it was time to start pulling the headliner out. When you're removing the headliner, you have to be very mindful to not crease it, because if you crease it, it's the kind of thing that's not going to come out, and you're probably going to have to buy a new headliner. Thankfully though, we got it out with no issue, and now we're ready to go install the headliner kit. So in this Jeep, we're putting black suede on the headliner. To do that, we first have to clean it up before we bother putting any adhesive on it to make sure that it will tack properly. Right now, I'm kind of just going around the perimeter and the inside of it with a towel and soapy water, and then I'm going over it afterward with a lint roller just to get any hairs and random particles off of it. And to be clear, I don't think this step is even needed. I haven't seen any of the headliner guys online do this, but I'm pretty picky with stuff like this, and I want to make sure that that's not going to be something that screws up the install. When you put hours and hours of work into a project like this, you really want to make sure the small details are ironed out. So now I'm kind of just test fitting the suede, laying it over, making sure I have enough, and trimming the extra. I had to buy this stuff by the yard, so I ended up with quite a bit extra, more than I needed. But that being said, it's always good to have extra, especially because when you're done adhesing this side of it, you have to also tuck the back edges. You might see my fiance running around in the background, and while I'm working on this, she's actually sanding down and painting all of the upper trim pieces that hold the headliner in place. While it has nothing directly to do with the headliner install, it adds for a really nice touch at the end that you'll be able to see. She's probably holding up the sanded piece for the camera before she goes ahead and paints it. Now I'm just trimming up the suede that's going to be put on the headliner before we adhese it. And I lint roll once more to make sure any hairs or dust from the shop doesn't get on top of it. Turned out that this was a pretty good idea because the shop's really dusty at the moment, and the suede had been sitting for a little while, so a lot came off of it. So it looks like we're about ready to start laying the headliner adhesive on. I got this all prepped. I prepped the suede and folded it up, and now I'm going to spray the shit out of this and hopefully not. Should probably put the wires behind this too. But yeah, we're all prepped up. I'm gonna spray this with adhesive and hope for the best. Hopefully it lays right. So I'm gonna lay the headliner on. While this part of the process was kind of satisfying to do, it's not very interesting to watch, so I'm fast forwarding through a lot of it. First, I'm centering the headliner on there, and then I'm going to fold over one side and basically go slowly across. So now I'm peeling the headliner back, and I have 3M spray cans of adhesive that's meant for headliner. Essentially, you spray the spot that you're going to lay it on, and you also spray the headliner itself, making 2 layers of the adhesive that could stick to each other. This stuff's not honestly that great to work with. It comes out like silly string and doesn't spray that well. So you have to kind of just go along the length of the headliner back and forth in rows, as you see me doing here. Since it's my first time using this spray can, I used way too much on this particular section and actually finished the entire can before even getting halfway down the headliner. And now we're just pressing down the suede onto the headliner so that the adhesive can properly tack. Basically, you just have to make sure that you smooth out any bumps or creases, and also to not leave any gaps between the suede and the headliner itself. If you leave any gaps between the suede and the headliner itself, it'll cause it to start sagging later on when you reinstall it, and to avoid this, you need to make sure it's perfectly flush. So at this point, we're really just smoothing it out, getting out the bumps, and making sure it'll stick properly. Basically, we ran out of headliner adhesive right off the rip because I'm stupid and don't know how much to use. So I used the whole can apparently on half the headliner. So we need to go get more cans, I guess. I also forget to mention here that it's like 11 p.m. So the only place we can go is Walmart, hoping they have it. Basically gonna go out and go get some more headliner adhesive so that we can finish sticking the headliner, the new headliner, the suede. And once we get the suede stuck, we'll make the cutouts, start marking holes. I'm gonna mark sections out so the holes are easier to count. And then once they're all marked, it's the poking stage, which should be pretty easy, hopefully. And yeah. This is how progress is coming with all the red accent pieces that she wanted to add. Got more headliner adhesive, so I guess we gotta keep ripping through. So we lucked out and we actually found a bunch of cans of 3M spray adhesive, the same exact that we were using in the automotive section of Walmart right before they closed. So shout out to Walmart for allowing this to happen at midnight. Once again, we're just applying the spray adhesive onto the headliner and then the suede on top, and also spraying the suede to make sure that they stick. As boring as it is to watch, I did actually have a lot of fun spraying the can on, because again, it's just like your Spider-Man shooting webs from your hands.
Go web! Fly! Up, up, and away, web!
This section of the headliner is really important since it's the center of the headliner and most likely to sag. If you've ever seen an old car with sagging headliner, it's usually the middle that it tends to start sagging from first, which makes a lot of sense. So this section, I was sure to put a little bit of extra adhesive. And I never really realized how much adhesive is required to stick this. I'm already about to finish the second can and have 2 more cans on standby that get mostly used in the rest of the process. When it comes to material costs, honestly, the adhesive is a huge portion of this project. Now we're back back to laying the suede right down onto the adhesive, while being mindful of the tension that's on it and trying to make sure we don't cause any creases or bumps. The nice thing is that suede is a really tough and durable material, so you can really press in really hard with no concern that it'll rip. Also, as you press down and the adhesive tacks, it stretches really nicely. I'm also sure I'll get some sort of comments asking about why we didn't do the headliner in 2 halves like a lot of people do online. And it seems like it's honestly way easier to make sure bumps and creases stay out, especially from the middle, if you just lay 3, 4, or 5 times instead of 2 times. So because we took our time with this part, we actually did a really good job, all things considered. There were very few creases or bumps, if any, and the few that there were along edges that get tucked underneath trim panels anyways. So I did have to trim quite a few clips from this video for the sake of it being interesting, but we're now finally on that last section of headliner, and once we stick the suede onto the headliner here, we then flip it over and take all those extra edges and tack them to the back for extra strength, and will really hold nicely once we reinstall the headliner. While doing this, I kept clipping the edges of my clothes on the headliner and getting it on me, which got kind of irritating, but I worked through it. So peeling back the final section of the suede, we're going to apply more adhesive, finish this up, and get to the next part of the process. While editing this, I'm really trying not to cut too much out of the video, but this process is just as boring to edit as it is to watch, so I apologize to anyone watching and appreciate you if you're still here. Just stay with me till the end of the video. I promise you the result's worth it. It's also got to be said, the amount of gloves I went through in this process, you'd think I'm working in a food setting. You have to somehow walk this line between not getting any adhesive on the top of the suede from your gloves, while also not changing gloves every 10 seconds because it gets really tedious. At long last, we're finally done with this headliner, or just about, after roughly 3 hours of labor, which isn't too bad, but also seems a little long, so we'll have to figure out a way to speed this process up in the future. That being said, there were no bubbles or creases, and this side of the headliner particularly seemed to stick really well while we were doing it. So now we can flip it over and stick the back of the suede to the headliner, as well as poke the holes for the lights. So at the moment, we're just trimming and tucking the edges of the suede so that we can actually stick it to the back of the headliner and make it hold a lot stronger. At this point, we had already let the rest of the headliner cure overnight, and we didn't want to wait for the curing process for the spray adhesive, so we used another kind of adhesive to stick it to the back. So we're just taking the edges and folding them up around the back with tension and sticking them down, then pushing out any of the creases or bumps with the hard card. While my buddy goes around laying a line of adhesive for me to fold the suede onto, I'm behind him pressing down the suede and making it smooth. This part of the process probably only took maybe 30 minutes, going all the way around the perimeter and making sure it was stuck. We then used weights, pins, and other things to hold the headliner in place on those corners and edges so that the adhesive actually had some pressure on it to help it cure. Also went around and folded in the suede on the inner pieces that had holes for the lights and for the other trim pieces. This way the suede creates a seamless form around the headliner that's completely stuck to the back and the front. I entrusted my fiance with the drill to go around and poke out the holes that we had already marked out. At some point off camera, we had already sorted the lights out into bundles and then sectioned out the headliner into different sections so that we could make it easier. And to make drilling the holes easier, we pre-marked all of the holes so that we know where to drill. So while my fiance is going around drilling out the holes, my buddy is sorting the lights into bundles so that we can make routing them around the headliner easier. Because when you're inserting the lights through the headliner, sorting them is really important to make sure that you don't have too many strands crossing over one another, creating kinks and making knots. If we didn't sort the lights into bundles and mark out sections ahead of time, it would have made a mess when we were trying to put the lights through. So this just makes sure that when we're routing the lights, it'll be a lot neater. While the suede at this point was sticking to the headliner really well, we also had to be careful because the headliner adhesive was still curing, and if we pushed too hard with the drill, we could actually risk the suede coming up off the headliner. So we just had to be careful with the drill while poking the holes, making sure we're just drilling the hole out and it's not pushing the suede down with it. As you'll see, we'll be taking a lot of turns during this because it's a pretty uncomfortable position to be bent over the headliner drilling the holes. But at this point, most of the holes had already been drilled and all of them had been marked, so we decided to start sticking lights through. So when you pull each strand of fiber optic lights through each hole, you have to be careful not to put too much tension on it, but also want it to be pulled through enough to make sure that you don't have to push it through again. And we also noticed even if we drilled one hole 3 or 4 times with the drill, sometimes it wouldn't go all the way through still, and it would make it really difficult to put the light through. I think in the future, pinhole needles are the best for this, so you can put the light through the hole in the pin and then push it all the way through, which guarantees that it'll pierce. Because if you try to push the light through and it hasn't pierced all the way through, again, you risk pushing the suede down from the headliner, which we don't want. Especially while the headliner adhesive is still curing, we want to make sure we don't interrupt that process and preserve the adhesive's strength. So by now we're making good progress on the lights, and we've probably put through a couple hundred lights at this point and are on 3rd, 4th, and 5th sections. Did actually forget to record the rest of the process, but it's more of the same. Now with our suede stuck to the headliner and our starlight kit installed, we decided it was time to throw it back in the Jeep. Just as before, when we were removing the headliner, we have to be careful not to crease it while putting it back in, especially since we now have the starlight kit popping up from the top of it with fragile lights that break if you push up on them too hard. We didn't get much film of the installation process since all 3 of us were working on it, but it was just about as straightforward as taking it out, just making sure that we get the headliner in place properly before putting all the trim pieces back.
Alright, plug this shit in.
And as I'm plugging the lights in, I'm realizing that they didn't come on.
You have to give the car power, I'm guessing.
Oh wait, maybe I should try putting the key in the ignition. That might help.
Oh, yeah! Woohoo!
I'm closing my left knee.
So, long story short, we completed that job in just under 3 days with 3 to 4 people working on it. Took me about 20 plus hours of my own time. My fiance worked on it as well. She slaved away for a little longer than I did, if anything. But it came out really well. I'm gonna include some video footage of it after this clip. Really happy with how this came out, to be honest. I did not imagine we could have done this well on our first try, so we got plenty of content, plenty of footage, and actually I posted some videos and some pictures of how it came out to my personal Snapchat story, and a whole bunch of people want it. So basically I'm going to be busy with this coming up in the next month or two, and we might end up doing this a lot more often. We put a lot of hard work into this project. Like, comment, subscribe if you want to see more of this. I really want to keep doing YouTube, and I'm feeling really inspired to start making content on here, help my shop grow, help get some of what I do out there. So yeah, I appreciate it.